I'd call The Juggernaut Returns a should-watch, if not a must-watch, addition to the show. In it, you can see the Juggernaut convert a taxi cab into a McDonald's Happy Meal toy and punch a shark underwater in the face. In addition, the episode examines the complex and I think interesting background between Professor X and Juggernaut, especially when they were children, and provides some comic relief when a young archaeologist uncovers the source of Juggernaut's powers. IMDb has it at 7.0, which I think is reasonable. I would say there's just a lot of cool stuff in here, both for existing fans and newcomers alike, so check it out if you can. Wolverine and Storm are forced to take a deep-sea dive with the one and only Omega Red in A Deal with the Devil. I like this one a lot. It does depend a lot on the strength of the Omega Red character, but you're just not going to get a lot of episodes in X-Men the Animated Series like this one. The whole idea of Storm and Wolverine being stuck in a submarine with Omega Red with potential nuclear ramifications miles under the ocean is not something that you're going to see in any other episode. Aesthetic of the X-Men in deep dive suits and just being underwater in general is not common. You get to see Rogue in the third act piloting the Blackbird with a proficiency that we've not seen before, including gunning down potentially armed nuclear warheads. All in all, you're not going to not understand the X-Men the Animated Series story if you miss this one, but I do think you'll have a lot less fun if you don't watch it. IMDb gives it a 7.1. I hope you check it out. Sanctuary Part 1 introduces the idea of Asteroid M to X-Men the Animated Series, as well as Cortez, and even delves into some of Professor Xavier's romantic past. It's kind of a slow burn episode in my opinion, gearing up for the action in Sanctuary Part 2 in grand X-Men the Animated Series two-parter tradition. But with the stakes being as high as they are and the cliffhanger being as memorable, I'd give it a must-watch. IMDb has it at a 7.8, so I hope you enjoy. I thought Sanctuary Part 2 was a satisfying and predictably action-packed conclusion to the two-parter. You get to kind of see Cortez get his comeuppance in a sense, and the fate of Magneto is revealed. You also catch a couple of new outfits for the characters, which I think is fun. I also like seeing the Blackbird outfitted with Shi'ar technology. It's got a 7.8 on IMDb. Production value may not have been as high as they would have liked, but I would call it a must-watch. Hope you like it. Maybe I'm just a sucker for the Astral Plane and Shadow King stuff, but I think Xavier Remembers is a must-watch episode of X-Men the Animated Series. I love the flashback with Professor X visiting Cairo, I think it is, and being pickpocketed by a young Storm. I love the aesthetic of the Astral Plane and the various X-Men having to deal with their worst nightmares. IMDb gives it a 6.8. I would definitely check it out. Maybe not the top tier of must-watch recommendations, but from me anyway. But it's just a very memorable episode, and if you liked Whatever It Takes, I definitely don't think this will disappoint you. Courage is a very interesting episode of X-Men the Animated Series in my opinion. I would probably relegate it to the lower tier of must-watch episodes. How much you really are going to enjoy it probably depends on how much you enjoyed Season 1 and the entire Morph Chronicle journey. But yeah, in short, the team gets Morph back, and things are kind of up and down. You get to kind of catch up with Gyrick and Trask, and the Sentinels are back. I also think the episode is noteworthy because of its depiction of PTSD in the Xmen the Animated Series universe, if that is what Morph is going through in this episode. I'm not an expert in psychotherapy or psychoanalysis or trauma, but, Morph has his ups and downs after he's back. He's not totally better, and he's not consistent, and at the end, everything isn't okay. And I also think the episode works well as a primer for X-Men 97 when Morph is pretty much back on the team. It's got a 7.4 from IMDb. Like I said, I think it's a must-watch, just maybe not it's not an amazing episode in my opinion, and a lot of it depends on how much you care about follow-up from the events of Season 1 and somewhat Season 2 with Morph. But again, I would check it out. I hope you enjoy it. Cyclops gets stuck in a small town without his powers while trying to visit an ally of the X-Men in Secrets Not Long Buried, an episode that I like more now that I'm watching it again as part of the entire series. Maybe it's because I've lived in a small town, but all in all, I think it's a pretty enjoyable addition to the Cyclops backlore canon that the series maintains. The episode, as I mentioned, also is another one where you get an X-Man not able to rely on his powers the entire time. And Toad gets some decent screen time in this one too, so if you like that idea, there's that. IMDb gives it a 6.6. I would probably like to see it a bit higher, maybe closer to a 7. But yeah, hope you check it out and enjoy. I'd say the episode known as Nightcrawler deserves a must-watch for X-Men the Animated Series. It's got a lot going for it, and it's a lot of fun while also being important in that it introduces the titular Nightcrawler to the series. The episode starts out in kind of a cool monster movie, Frankenstein, villagers storming the castle kind of way, and progresses through a ski trip scenario with Rogue, Wolverine, and Gambit that has pretty funny elements to it. And ultimately, the trio ends up in a monastery where they do run into Nightcrawler and meet him for the first time. There's a mystery going on about who's good and who's bad. Nightcrawler is obviously German. I assume this is taking place in Germany, and if not, it's Germany adjacent. I'm from Germany originally, so I may be a bit biased here. But I think the episode is cool and a lot of fun. You've got Gambit in his fresh late 80s, early 90s ski outfit, and wisecracking Wolverine. The episode's also interesting because it has some non-secular elements to it. I guess you can't say anything about that because X-Men doesn't shy away from other somewhat controversial elements in society. But by the end, Wolverine either discovers or rediscovers God, and there's a lot of God stuff in this one. So it stands out for that reason. IMDb gives it an 8.0. I would say definitely check it out. Definitely give it a watch. I hope you like it. So, I describe the One Man's Worth storyline to someone as X-Men the Animated Series, plus Terminator, plus Back to the Future, with a dash of Age of Apocalypse mixed in, which this may have actually informed if you're familiar with the Age of Apocalypse storyline. I'll have to dive into that to see which came first, but at any rate, if you thought the previous time travel adventures were a little tricky, do I have the two-parter for you. In this one, we get to see present day transformed into an alternate present day, return of our favorite time traveler Bishop, as well as some new friends, and ultimately the attempt to prevent the assassination of Charles Xavier when he was younger. Like with other episodes, it's kind of hard for me to say what someone who hasn't seen this before would say today, because it may not seem as fresh, but I would call it a must-watch. I mentioned Age of Apocalypse earlier, so in this one you get to see Mohawk Storm and Wolverine as husband and wife, which I think is practically enough to watch this on its own. It's got an 8.0 on IMDb right now. I think that's pretty fair. I would call it a must-watch. Check it out. Okay, so One Man's Worth Part 2. I'm probably not going to spend a ton of time on this one today. Suffice it to say, it's a satisfying conclusion to the One Man's Worth two-parter, but I do think it relies a lot on what One Man's Worth Part 1 set up, and you'll see what I mean if you watch it. Basically, the story wraps up in a satisfactory way, and that's really all you need to know. It's got an 8.2 on IMDb. I think, that's reasonable, even though the first episode is better in my opinion, especially from like a structural standpoint. I like the way it loops if you wanted to, but at any rate, nothing to complain about really. I think the 8.2 is, I think the audience ranks it a little bit higher because it's got a pretty emotional ending. But yeah, all in all, check it out. Obviously, if you watch Part 1, you'll probably want to watch Part 2. Man, Moira McTaggart ends up being a pretty central character in the series, doesn't she? She's not saving Morph, she's trying to fix Jean, and hanging out with Charles. In this episode, we're worried about her son, who's gotten out and is running amok. In Proteus Part 1, I would call this a must-watch episode, if for no other reason than the fact that you finally learn about the history between Moira and Charles, and it opens up a pretty interesting window into Xavier's past. Other than that, I mean, it's interesting in its own right as well. It's a change of pace for sure, so definitely check it out. It's got a 7.2 on IMDb. From my perspective, I would agree it's not a top-notch episode. I would tell most people to watch it as they make their way through this series. Thanks. Take care. Fans of complex and somewhat depressing family dynamics, the Scottish political scene, and the X-Men are in luck, thanks to Proteus Part 2, an episode I thought I'd like less than Part 1, but ended up liking more. It's got a 7.2 on IMDb, which is the same rating as Part 1. But I think all in all, this is the more balanced episode. Its central core is all about Kevin, Moira's son, trying to reconnect with his biological father, and that carries all the emotional and psychological gravitas with it that you would expect it to, particularly in this show. I would give it a higher rating because of its subject matter and how well I think it was handled, in part because Proteus Part 1 is a must-watch, and in part because I think this was a solid episode. I would consider this a must-watch. I would tell most people to check it out. Now, don't get me wrong, I can see why they made the episode Family Ties. Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch are no slouches, and getting into their back history and their backstory simultaneously gets into Magneto's back history and backstory and fleshes both out simultaneously. But the episode itself is hardly what I would call critical. It's kind of weird, but strange can be part of the deal in this show, and that's totally okay. All in all, IMDb gives it a 7.4. Do I think you need to rush to watch it? Probably not. I think that you can get around to this when you get around to this. It doesn't seem to have a massive impact on the rest of the show, and I see the value in it, but I also think there are better episodes to spend your time with if you are not going to watch all of them. So, the episode known as Bloodlines, not unlike Family Ties, is about a bunch of stuff that's more circumstantial, in my opinion, than it is meaningful. That is to say, you find out about the history of certain characters in this episode, and, you know, I guess it's one of those things where it's interesting to know about it, like kind of a fun fact, but I'm not sure it really is that important, and unfortunately it more or less kind of comes across as a filler episode to me. So again, unless you're going to watch all these episodes, if you only have time for some of the better ones, by general consensus, I wouldn't suggest that you go out of your way to watch this one. But you know, if you really like the Nightcrawler character as he's represented in this show, Rogue and Mystique, and Creed and Sabretooth, then, you know, you may find something to like in this as well. It's got a 7.7 from IMDb, which, if you ask me, I've definitely seen episodes I think are better and more worth the time of people watching the series, with lower ratings than that. So, again, just my opinion, but not too high on this episode. If you want to learn more about Nightcrawler, Mystique, and Creed, or maybe some of the social issues that are explored in the episode speak to you personally, then by all means. But other than that, it's nothing that I feel like is going to be too impactful for the series as a whole. Hope you like it if you watch it. Lotus and the Steel starts with a mini flashback episode of all the things that might be bothering Wolverine, as aided by Professor X, and settles on the idea that Wolverine is losing control of his anger and lashing out, and therefore needs to leave the X-Men, at least temporarily, to visit Japan to try to get his head together. I found this episode to be an episode of the X-Men, and it's another solo adventure featuring one team member with a B player involved in Jubilee. But, you know, if you're watching the whole series in order, you've seen this before. Wolverine kind of goes off on these spear quests or these solo adventures now and again, and you know, in this case, he's in a village in Japan, and he has to take out a big bad in Silver Samurai, and it concludes with him, I guess, indeed getting his head straight. He uses his head over his fists, and I suppose that's sort of one of the lessons that he learns on this adventure. But again, do I think it's like an absolute must-watch? Nah. You can pick this one up whenever you'd like. Definitely not a bad episode. It's got a 7.4 from IMDb, so it's interesting to see Wolverine in a different setting, in a different country, I'll give it that. And I'd say there's at least some character development adjacent stuff going on in it. Like I said, not a bad episode. Hope you enjoy if you check it out. Kudos to whomever came up with the title. For anyone who doesn't know, it's a riff on a Steven Soderbergh movie that came out around the same time. But yeah, so Weapon X Lies in Videotape is the revelatory episode that the title implies it's going to be. You follow Wolverine, Sabretooth, Maverick, and Silver Fox through locales that allow them to uncover secrets behind the Weapon X program. Beast quotes Alfred Lord Tennyson. I'm reading things that imply that this episode is actually supposed to come before Lotus and the Steel in viewing order, so you may want to look into that. I will. Yeah, it's got an 8.0 on IMDb. Because the elements of the Weapon X program are such a large part of Wolverine's backstory and other parts of the series, I would call it a must-watch episode. So definitely check it out. Hope you like it. Hello and happy 4th of July to those in America celebrating. What better way to celebrate than to listen to my recap of Have Yourself a Morlock Little Xmas. Have Yourself a Morlock Little Xmas is a must-watch episode of X-Men the Animated Series, and I will die on that hill. It's got everything you could possibly ask for out of a Christmas special involving the X-Men from this era and in this show. You've got adorable little Morlocks, doubling as Dickensian urchins, Jean and Gambit fighting in the kitchen over food preparation, and a very wholesome arc involving Jubilee. Storm also gives leadership responsibilities back to Callisto, so there is some actual narrative importance to this episode. IMDb gives it a 6.3, but come on guys, this should be at least a 7. Just because they're not fighting Apocalypse at Christmas time doesn't make it a bad Christmas episode. It's X-Men the Animated Series, let's have some fun. So, gather around the fireplace and enjoy Gambit in a chef's hat. Check it out now on the 4th of July or around the holidays. Thanks and take care. So, summarizing Beyond Good and Evil Parts 1 through 4 is kind of an unenviable task in this format because, as I mentioned, it's a 4-parter. And not only that, it involves time travel. And not only that, but as this show tends to go, it's not the simplest time travel in the world. So, let's get started. Beyond Good and Evil Part 1 is basically asking the question, what if Apocalypse and time travel and Cable and Mr. Sinister and Mr. Sinister's nasty boys and Scott and Jean get married again and Mr. Sinister interferes and One Man's Worth and Shard and Bishop and Forge and Axis of Time were all rolled into one episode / 4-parter. And you've got the answer. Beyond Good and Evil Part 1. IMDb has it at an 8.0. Tough to pick which one of these would be my favorite of the 4, but I would say this one's definitely in the running, partially because it's setting everything up and it's kind of exciting because you don't know what's going to happen yet. But, you know, as stories tend to go, they have to end somewhere as well. So I would say it is a must-watch. Beyond Good and Evil Part 2 has an 8.0 on IMDb, and I wouldn't really say there's anything wrong with the episode, but I don't know if you absolutely need to watch it. I guess I might call it like a bricklaying or bridge episode. We've already had Part 1, we need to get to Part 3, and this episode does that. Whether or not this is a must-watch for you personally may depend on how interested you are in Psylocke, who makes her series debut in this episode. And maybe Angel / Archangel, and possibly hearing Apocalypse refer to the axis of time as where all times cross and the temporal control center of existence. Almost forgot Wolverine does a Popeye reference to make fun of Sabretooth. So again, if those things sounded good, or if you just love to get all the nitty-gritty details of the story, then I think it's a must-watch for you. Otherwise, you can probably get away with watching the next Previously on X-Men recap on Part 3. I can see similarities between Beyond Good and Evil Part 3 and Dark Phoenix Part 3. Both parts or episodes are kind of getting into the nitty-gritty before the grand finale of their respective fourth parts. In Beyond Good and Evil Part 3, Cable and his son Tyler are trying to boost a government time machine, which is known as the Grey Malkin, which happens to be the name of the lane that Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters is on. It's also pretty big. In fact, it's large enough to seat multiple members of the X-Men, which is exactly what it ends up doing when they travel to Cairo in the year 1200 BC. The goal, as usual, is to take out Apocalypse's Lazarus Pit or Regeneration Chamber, and it goes about as well as you might expect. It's got an 8.0 from IMDb. Looking at it from the perspective of a vacuum, I think this is the first time you get to see the X-Men from the present day travel through time, which I think is a nice change of pace at least. I would call this a must-watch episode. In terms of the context of Beyond Good and Evil, if you're going to watch any of it, I think you do need to watch this one. And, like I said, it's cool to watch the X-Men that we know travel through time, and there are some pretty important Apocalypse-related moments in it as well. It all comes down to this, Beyond Good and Evil Part 4. This is the fourth part in the Beyond Good and Evil four-parter, and I sometimes think of it as the unofficial series finale to X-Men the Animated Series, although there are 10 episodes left. But it is the Season 4 finale officially. On its own, I would probably still consider this episode to be a must-watch, even if you hadn't seen any of the other Beyond Good and Evil episodes. And that's because it is kind of a character-defining moment for Apocalypse. You really get to the bottom of what he's been trying to accomplish. And it is also an episode involving Apocalypse's fate. And because he has been the big bad, so to speak, of X-Men the Animated Series, essentially, whenever something really goes wrong, he's behind it. I don't really see how you could skip this one. I don't want to spoil too much, I don't want to go into too many details, but I would say that maybe, like, if I had any kind of a gripe, it would be that Apocalypse's plan seems a little easy to upend, given that he has time travel to his advantage. He can be a bit mustache-twirly at times, I think. But all in all, a very satisfying episode, in my opinion, especially if you've watched the other three. IMDb has it at an 8.2, meaning that people seem to like this one more than the previous three that were at 8.0 apiece. I'd be interested to watch them all, and, like, I'd love to watch all of these as, like, a movie sometime, just back to back to back to back. Because they all run about 20 minutes apiece, so 40, 80, so it's 80 minutes. It's almost an hour and a half. But yeah, anyway, definitely check it out. The scale of it, the scope of it, it's just so huge for this show that it's something that I don't think anybody who's remotely interested in the X-Men or Marvel should skip. It kind of has Endgame vibes if you like Endgame. Other than that, we're pretty much down to the last episodes of X-Men the Animated Series now. I've got 10 to go. I'm still deciding what to do next. If you've enjoyed these videos, please consider subscribing, liking, sharing, commenting. I think all that stuff helps. I'd love to start moving into longer form content. I'm doing what I can, but if you could definitely consider doing what you can, and I'd love to make this channel a place that does good for people. So if we can continue this and keep watching, any view is going to help, any share is going to help. And other than that, I hope that you watch and enjoy Beyond Good and Evil Part 4. Thanks, and take care.